The arena stretched out like a metallic desert under harsh white lights that could blind a weaker species. Commander Zexthul stood behind reinforced crystalline barriers, his four eyes gleaming with anticipation as he watched the human female walk calmly into the center of the combat zone. She moved with a strange, almost lazy confidence that made his mandibles click nervously. Captain Sarah Chen stepped onto the blood-stained sand, her standard-issue military boots leaving deep prints in the rusty dirt. Around her, the circular arena walls rose 50 meters high, lined with seats filled with representatives from across the Galactic Council. Thousands of alien beings from dozens of species had gathered to witness what they believed would be the final humiliation of humanity's military might. The Vorthak delegation chittered excitedly in their section, their insectoid forms practically vibrating with glee. They had been pushing for humanity's expulsion from the Council for months, claiming that humans were too weak, too primitive to deserve a seat among the civilized races of the galaxy. Today's challenge was meant to prove their point once and for all. Sarah rolled her shoulders and cracked her neck, the sounds echoing strangely in the vast space. She wore simple black fatigues and combat boots, with only a small communication device clipped to her collar. No weapons, no armor, no technological enhancements, just a human woman standing alone in an arena designed to showcase the galaxy's most feared predators. High above in the luxury viewing box reserved for Council leadership, Ambassador Cleith of the Zentari leaned forward in his hover chair. His gray skin had taken on a greenish tinge that indicated either excitement or nausea. With Zentari, it was often hard to tell the difference. "Are you certain about this, Human Ambassador Torres?" Cleith's voice carried the wet, bubbling quality typical of his amphibious species. "Your champion appears." "Unremarkable." Ambassador Maria Torres smiled thinly, her dark eyes never leaving the arena floor. She had argued against this spectacle, but the Council had insisted, if humanity wanted to maintain their voting rights and military cooperation agreements, they would have to prove their worth in trial by combat. It was an ancient tradition, rarely invoked, but perfectly legal under galactic law. "Appearances can be deceiving, Ambassador Cleith," Torres replied, her voice steady despite the knot of worry in her stomach. Sarah Chen was one of Earth's best, a veteran of the asteroid wars and the Tau Ceti incident. But she was still just one human, against whatever nightmare the Vorthak had prepared. Down in the arena, Sarah checked her watch, a simple analog timepiece that had belonged to her grandfather. The Vorthak had insisted on their traditional challenge format. They would release their ultimate predator, and if it could kill the human champion within 30 minutes, humanity would be stripped of all Council privileges and reduced to a client species under Vorthak protection. A deep rumble echoed through the arena as massive gates began to iris open on the far side of the combat zone. The sound was mechanical, yet organic, like the breathing of some enormous beast. The spectators fell silent, and even the normally chattering Vorthak went still with anticipation. Sarah flexed her fingers and settled into a loose, balanced stance. She had studied the available footage of Vorthak predators for weeks, memorizing movement patterns and attack behaviors. The Vorthak were proud hunters who had conquered 17 worlds before joining the Council, and their bioengineered war beasts were legendary for their savagery and effectiveness. The gates finished opening with a wet, slurping sound that made several alien species in the audience shift uncomfortably. For a moment, nothing emerged from the dark tunnel beyond. Then came the clicking, a rapid, rhythmic sound like claws on metal that grew louder and more intense with each passing second. What emerged from the tunnel was a nightmare made flesh. The Vorthak called it a death stalker, though the translation hardly did justice to the creature's horrifying appearance. It stood 3 meters tall at the shoulder and nearly 7 meters long from snout to tail, its body covered in overlapping plates of chitin that gleamed like black mirrors under the arena lights. 6 legs, each ending in curved talons the length of sword blades, carried the beast forward with surprising grace. Its head was a wedge of bone and muscle dominated by jaws that could snap a ground vehicle in half. Rows of teeth like crystalline daggers lined its mouth, dripping with venom that hissed and steamed where it hit the sand. But the most unsettling feature was its eyes. Not the compound eyes of most insectoid species, but large, intelligent organs that tracked movement with predatory focus. The Vorthak had bred cunning into their ultimate predator, along with killing power. The creature's head swiveled toward Sarah, and it released a sound that was part shriek, part roar, part the screaming of tortured metal. The noise hit the arena barriers and echoed back amplified, causing several smaller alien species to cover their auditory organs in pain. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she did something that stunned every being in the arena. She chuckled. It was a low, genuinely amused sound that carried clearly in the sudden silence following the Deathstalker's challenge roar. Then she reached for her collar and pressed the communication device. "Control, this is Chen. I'm going to need you to wake up Luna and prep the drop pod." "Yes. I know what time it is back home." "Yes, I know she's cranky when you wake her up early. Just tell her mommy needs her help with some overgrown bugs." The communication cut out, and Sarah smiled at the massive predator now stalking toward her with deadly intent. The Deathstalker moved in a pattern she recognized, circling to find the optimal attack angle, while looking for signs of fear or panic in its prey. Commander Zexthul leaned forward against the barrier, his mandibles clicking rapidly in confusion. What is she doing? What did she call for? Up in the viewing box, Ambassador Torres checked her own communicator. A message was already coming through from Earth Defense Command. "Package en route. ETA 4 minutes. Tell the captain to keep dancing until then." The Deathstalker completed its first circle and began to close the distance, its powerful legs coiling for a strike. Venomous saliva dripped more freely now, pooling in the sand around Sarah's position. The creature's hunting instincts were fully engaged, and its bioengineered brain was calculating the most efficient way to kill the small, seemingly helpless human. Sarah bounced lightly on the balls of her feet, her hands loose at her sides. To the untrained observer, she looked almost casual, but anyone with military experience could see the signs: perfect balance, controlled breathing, muscles coiled, and ready for explosive movement. "That's right, ugly," she said conversationally, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena. "Take your time. Circle around. My girl's going to want to make a proper entrance." The Deathstalker struck without warning, its massive form launching forward with frightening speed. Talons that could shred steel plating swept toward Sarah's position in a killing arc that should have torn her apart in seconds. Instead, the human was simply gone. Sarah rolled under the creature's belly, her movement so fluid and precise that it seemed choreographed. The Deathstalker's claws struck empty sand, sending up a spray of grit and sparks where they gouged the arena floor. Before the beast could recover, Sarah was back on her feet and running, not away, but in a tight circle around the creature's legs. She moved like a dancer, staying just out of reach as the Deathstalker spun and snapped, trying to bring its weapons to bear on the frustratingly elusive human. The alien spectators watched in stunned silence as Sarah played an impossible game of tag with certain death. She leaped over sweeping claws, slid under snapping jaws, and seemed to anticipate the creature's every move. It was like watching a mouse torment a cat, if the mouse had military training and nerves of steel. "Impossible," breathed Commander Zexthul. "No being can move like that. She should be dead 3 times over." But Sarah wasn't just moving randomly. She was leading the Deathstalker in a specific pattern, keeping it focused on her while positioning it exactly where she needed it to be. Every dodge, every roll, every desperate-looking escape was calculated and precise. Above them, the arena's force field began to flicker as something large and fast approached from orbit. The energy signatures were off the charts, causing the Galactic Council's sensors to scream warnings about incoming ordnance. Sarah glanced at her grandfather's watch and grinned. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. Right on schedule. High above the arena, something roared through the planet's atmosphere with the force of a controlled meteor. The sound was unlike anything the assembled aliens had ever heard. Not the scream of conventional engines or the hum of gravitic drives, but something primal and organic, and absolutely terrifying. The Deathstalker paused in its attack, its predator instincts suddenly screaming warnings about something far more dangerous approaching from above. It raised its head toward the arena's ceiling, nostrils flaring as it tried to identify the new threat. Sarah stopped running and straightened up, breathing hard but grinning widely. "That's my girl," she said with unmistakable pride and affection. Right on time. The force field above the arena was designed to contain any energy discharge or projectile, but it wasn't prepared for what hit it next. Something massive struck the barrier with enough force to crack the reinforced energy matrix, sending cascading failures through the containment system. Emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the arena complex as the force field collapsed entirely, leaving nothing but open sky above the combat zone. And through that opening, with a roar that shook the foundations of the building, something impossible descended toward the arena floor. Ambassador Torres smiled for the first time since the challenge had been announced. "Gentlemen," she said to the shocked council members, "I'd like you to meet humanity's ultimate predator." What descended through the shattered force field defied every law of biology and physics that the Galactic Council thought they understood. At first glance, it appeared to be some kind of atmospheric entry vehicle, its hull glowing cherry red from the heat of re-entry. But as it drew closer, the assembled aliens realized with growing horror that the glowing wasn't from friction heating, it was from the creature's own body temperature. Luna hit the arena floor with an impact that sent shockwaves through the reinforced structure. Sand exploded outward in a massive crater, and several of the closer viewing sections had to activate emergency shields as debris rained down on the spectators. When the dust cleared, the galaxy's representatives got their first clear look at humanity's secret weapon. She was magnificent and terrible. A dragon pulled from Earth's oldest legends and given flesh through genetic engineering that bordered on the miraculous. Luna stood 40 meters from nose to tail tip, her scales shifting from deep crimson along her back to burnished gold on her belly. Each scale was the size of a dinner plate and harder than military-grade armor plating. Her wings, folded against her sides, showed the sophisticated engineering that had gone into her creation. The membrane between the wing bones wasn't simple skin but a complex biomaterial that could absorb and redirect energy, making her nearly immune to most forms of attack. When she stretched one wing experimentally, alien scientists in the audience began frantically taking readings that their instruments couldn't quite believe. But it was her head that truly captured attention. Luna's skull was built like a living siege engine, with jaw muscles that could generate pressure measured in tons per square inch. Her teeth weren't just sharp, they were composed of a crystalline matrix that could cut through starship hull plating. And her eyes, those ancient, intelligent eyes, held the accumulated wisdom of a creature that had been alive for 3 centuries. The Deathstalker, faced with something that triggered every prey instinct evolution had given it, did the only sensible thing. It ran. The Vorthak's ultimate predator, their proudest creation, their unstoppable killing machine, took one look at Luna and immediately began scrambling toward the arena walls with desperate, panicked movements. Its claws scraped frantically at the smooth metal surfaces, trying to find purchase for an escape that its primitive brain knew was the only chance for survival. Sarah walked calmly across the crater-strewn sand toward her companion, completely ignoring the chaos around her. "Hey there. Beautiful," she said, reaching up to scratch the scales behind Luna's left ear, a spot that always made the massive dragon rumble with pleasure. "Sorry to wake you up, but we've got some visitors who need a lesson in manners." Luna's response was a sound that started as a purr and ended as a growl that made the entire arena structure vibrate. She lowered her great head to nuzzle Sarah gently, careful not to accidentally crush the tiny human with her affection. Then she turned to regard the Deathstalker, which had given up trying to climb the walls and was now pressed against them in abject terror. Commander Zexthul had gone completely silent, his 4 eyes wide with shock as his worldview crumbled around him. In the viewing box above, several council members had already begun quietly updating their military assessments of human capabilities. Ambassador Cleeth's skin had shifted from green to a pale yellow that indicated either fascination or the onset of cardiac arrest. "That," whispered the Zentari ambassador, "is not possible. Dragons are mythological creatures. They cannot exist." Ambassador Torres pulled up a holographic display from her personal datapad, showing Luna's technical specifications. Luna is one of 12 members of Earth's Dragon Corps, genetically engineered from extinct Earth reptiles, and enhanced with technologies we've developed over the past 2 centuries. She's 307 years old, weighs approximately 400 tons, and has a maximum flight speed in atmosphere of Mach 3.2. The specifications continued to scroll past increasingly impossible numbers. Bite force: 47,000 pounds per square inches. Fire temperature: 3,400 degrees Celsius. Intelligence quotient: estimated equivalent to PhD level human. Combat experience: classified, but extensive. Down in the arena, Sarah had finished her reunion with Luna and was now walking toward the trapped Death Stalker. The Vorthak creature whimpered, actually whimpered, as the small human approached. Behind Sarah, Luna followed with movements that were somehow both graceful and threatening, like a living mountain that had decided to go for a stroll. "Now then," Sarah said conversationally, stopping just out of reach of the Death Stalker's claws. "I believe your masters wanted to see which of us was the better predator. Luna, would you care to demonstrate?" Luna's response was immediate and devastating. She opened her jaws and released a gout of flame that turned the sand in front of the Death Stalker into glass. The heat was so intense that even the arena's environmental systems couldn't compensate, and the temperature in the viewing areas spiked noticeably. But Luna wasn't trying to kill the Vorthak creature. Not yet. This was a display, a demonstration of power that was both merciful and terrifying. The message was clear. "I could incinerate you without effort, but I choose not to. Be grateful for my restraint." The Death Stalker collapsed onto its belly, all 6 legs folding beneath it in a posture of complete submission. In Vorthak culture, this was the absolute surrender gesture. The acknowledgement that one faced a superior predator and was begging for life. Commander Zexthul felt his legs give out as the implications hit him. His species' ultimate weapon, their proudest achievement, their guarantee of dominance, had been reduced to a cowering wretch by something that shouldn't exist. Humanity hadn't just won the challenge. They had proven that the Vorthak didn't even understand what true predatory power looked like. Sarah turned toward the viewing sections, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustics. "I think that settles the question of who has the better predator. But since we've gone to all this trouble, let me tell you a little story about where Luna came from." She began walking in a slow circle around the prostrate Death Stalker, Luna following behind like a loyal guard dog that happened to be the size of a building. "Thousands of years ago, my people told stories about creatures like Luna. We called them dragons, and in our myths, they were the most powerful beings in existence. They could fly faster than any bird, breathe fire hotter than any volcano, and their intelligence rivaled that of the wisest humans." Luna rumbled approvingly at the description, a sound that made the arena's metal framework vibrate in harmony. "But dragons were just stories, right?" Sarah continued, her tone becoming more pointed. "Myths and legends that primitive humans made up because we were too stupid to understand real science. At least, that's what every species in the Galactic Council told us when we first made contact 50 years ago." Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The early years of human integration into galactic society had indeed been marked by condescension and dismissal. Humanity's technology had seemed primitive, their military laughably weak, their culture unsophisticated by galactic standards. "So we listened," Sarah said, her voice hardening slightly. "We learned your technologies, adapted your methods, tried to fit into your idea of what a proper spacefaring civilization should look like. But we never forgot our stories. We never stopped believing that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Luna spread her wings slightly, and several energy readings in the viewing areas spiked as her bioelectric field interacted with the arena's systems. The display of power was subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. "It took us 30 years to crack the genetic codes," Sarah continued. "Another 20 to solve the engineering problems. Dragon physiology is incredibly complex. Their fire-breathing organs alone require 17 different specialized glands working in perfect harmony. And that's before you get to the neural modifications needed for true intelligence enhancement." Commander Zexthul finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Impossible. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. No biological creature could sustain such metabolic demands." Sarah smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression that made several aliens lean back in their seats. That's where you're wrong, Commander. Luna doesn't just eat food for energy. She processes raw matter at the atomic level. Her digestive system can break down anything from organic compounds to pure metals and convert it to usable fuel. She's literally powered by the laws of physics themselves. To demonstrate, Luna leaned down and bit off a chunk of the arena's metal wall, chewing and swallowing it with obvious satisfaction. Within seconds, the temperature readings from her body began climbing as the consumed metal was converted to energy. Of course, Sarah added casually, that's just one dragon. Earth currently maintains 12 active members of the Dragon Corps, with plans to expand the program significantly in the coming years. We figure one dragon per major star system should be sufficient to maintain peace and stability. The threat was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took several moments for its full implications to sink in. 12 dragons, 12 creatures capable of single-handedly destroying fleets, burning planets, reducing entire civilizations to ash. And humanity was planning to build more. Ambassador Torres chose that moment to stand, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. The Galactic Council has seen humanity's response to your challenge, Commander Zexthul. I trust this settles any questions about our species' qualifications for continued membership? Luna punctuated the ambassador's words by releasing another burst of flame. This one directed harmlessly upward, but intense enough to leave afterimages burned into the retinas of everyone watching. The message was unmistakable. This demonstration could become something much more serious, with very little provocation. The Death Stalker, still pressed against the arena wall in submission, let out a pitiful whine that somehow managed to convey both terror and apology. Its entire body language screamed that it wanted nothing more than to return to wherever it had come from and pretend this encounter had never happened. Sarah looked up at the viewing sections one final time, her expression pleasant, but her eyes holding depths of steel that promised terrible consequences for anyone foolish enough to test humanity's patience again. I think we're done here. Unless anyone else would like to volunteer their ultimate predator for a friendly comparison? The silence that followed was absolute. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Ambassador Cleith managed to speak, his amphibious voice barely above a whisper. How many of your people know about this? Dragon Corps? Ambassador Torres smiled with the kind of diplomatic precision that had served humanity well in its dealings with galactic society. Every human child learns about dragons before they can walk. Ambassador, the stories are part of our cultural foundation. As for the specific military applications, she paused, letting the weight of implications settle. That information is available on a need-to-know basis. Down in the arena, Sarah was conducting what appeared to be a casual conversation with Luna, though the dragon's responses consisted entirely of rumbles, growls, and the occasional puff of superheated air. To anyone watching, it looked like a pet owner talking to an unusually large and dangerous companion. The reality, as several xenobiologists in the audience were beginning to realize, was far more complex. Luna's asking if she can have the bug for lunch, Sarah announced cheerfully, gesturing toward the still cowering Deathstalker. She says Vorthak bioengineering has a distinctive flavor that she's curious to try. I told her we should probably ask permission first, since this is technically a diplomatic venue. The Vorthak delegation erupted in horrified chittering at this casual threat to devour their ultimate creation. Commander Zexthul rose shakily to his feet, his exoskeleton clicking with agitation. You cannot be serious. The Deathstalker represents decades of genetic engineering and billions of credits in development costs. Sarah shrugged. Luna represents 3 centuries of accumulated combat experience and technologies your species couldn't comprehend if we drew you detailed diagrams. I think that makes her the more valuable asset here, don't you? Luna chose that moment to demonstrate her intelligence by carefully picking up the Deathstalker in her jaws, holding the massive creature like a cat carrying a particularly large mouse. The Vorthak predator went completely limp, playing dead in the desperate hope that this nightmare would end without further violence. The sight of their ultimate weapon being treated like a chew toy finally broke the Vorthak delegation entirely. Several of the smaller members of their party began frantically updating their personal datapads, no doubt revising military assessments and strategic recommendations. Commander Zexthul simply stared in defeat, watching his species' pride being casually manhandled by something that shouldn't exist. Of course, Sarah continued conversationally, Luna's really more of a space superiority fighter. If we're talking about ground combat, you'd probably want to meet her sister Tempest. She specializes in urban warfare and siege operations. Or maybe Nightmare, she's our stealth specialist, absolutely invisible until she wants to be seen. And by then it's usually too late. Each casual mention of another dragon sent fresh waves of shock through the assembled aliens. Ambassador Torres helpfully provided technical data as Sarah spoke. Her holographic displays showing brief glimpses of the other members of Earth's Dragon Corps. Each one was uniquely designed for specific combat roles. Each one capable of single-handedly changing the outcome of military conflicts. Tempest appeared on the display as a sleek, black-scaled creature whose hide could shift opacity to match her surroundings. Her specialization in urban warfare was evident in her more compact build and the additional manipulator appendages that allowed her to navigate complex terrain with frightening agility. Nightmare was barely visible even in the technical photographs, her scales appearing to absorb light rather than reflect it. The display noted her ability to remain undetected by virtually all known sensor technologies, making her the perfect assassination tool for high-value targets. Then there's Earthquake, Sarah added, warming to her subject. She's our heavy bombardment specialist. Bit of a temper, and she has this habit of testing her flame against planetary crusts just to see how deep she can melt. We had to relocate 3 mining operations after her last training exercise. The implications were staggering. 12 dragons, each one a strategic weapon capable of reshaping battlefields, each one representing technologies that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children playing with stone tools, and humanity was planning to build more. Luna carefully set the Death Stalker back down on the arena floor, where it immediately resumed its submissive posture. The dragon then turned to regard the viewing sections with ancient, intelligent eyes that seemed to weigh each alien species against some unknowable standard. The beautiful thing about dragons, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena, is that they're not just weapons, they're partners. Luna and I have been together for 15 years now. She's saved my life more times than I can count, and I'd trust her with anything that matters to me. She reached up to scratch Luna's chin, and the massive dragon rumbled with pleasure, the sound somehow both threatening and oddly comforting. Dragons bond for life, you see. Once they choose a partner, that relationship becomes the most important thing in their existence. Luna would burn down entire star systems if someone threatened me, not because she was ordered to, but because she wanted to. The personal nature of the bond added an entirely new dimension to the threat. These weren't just military assets that could be targeted and destroyed. They were thinking, feeling creatures with personal motivations and the power to act on them. Attack a dragon's partner, and you didn't face military retaliation. You faced the focused wrath of something that could crack planets. Ambassador Torres chose that moment to address the broader implications of what they'd witnessed. The Galactic Council has operated under certain assumptions about human capabilities and potential. Today's demonstration should clarify that those assumptions were incomplete. Tension. 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 She gestured toward Luna, who had settled down beside Sarah like a living mountain, wings folded and eyes alert for any signs of threat. Humanity values peace and cooperation. We believe in the principles that founded this council, and we want to continue working together for the betterment of all species. But we also believe in being prepared for those who might mistake our preference for diplomacy as a sign of weakness. Commander Zex Thul found his voice again, though it shook with the effort. How long have you possessed these capabilities? The first successful dragon was awakened 43 years ago, Torres replied calmly. But the research began much earlier. Humans have always understood that the universe contains predators. Commander, we simply chose to become the apex predator rather than remain prey. The timing was significant, and several alien analysts began frantically recalculating historical events. 43 years ago, placed the first dragon's creation, right around the time humanity had begun its expansion into galactic society. Every diplomatic negotiation, every trade agreement, every military cooperation treaty had been conducted with humanity secretly possessing weapons that could rewrite the balance of power. The Terran hegemony border incident, whispered a representative from the Corvan Assembly. The pirate suppression campaign in the Outer Rim. The resolution of the Centauri trade dispute. Each event had been resolved with suspicious speed and efficiency, often with minimal human casualties despite facing supposedly superior forces. Ambassador Torres nodded acknowledgement. Humanity prefers to resolve conflicts through negotiation and economic pressure. But when those methods fail, we have other options available. Down in the arena, Sarah was preparing to leave. She gave Luna one final affectionate scratch before stepping back. "All right, beautiful. I think we've made our point. Time to head home." Luna rose to her full height, her massive form casting shadows across the entire arena floor. She spread her wings wide, the membrane between the wing bones beginning to glow with stored energy as she prepared for atmospheric exit. The display of power was casual but absolute. She was preparing to leave the planet's gravity well under her own power, something that should have been impossible for any biological creature. But before takeoff, Luna turned to regard the Vorthak delegation one final time. Her ancient eyes fixed on Commander Zexthal with an intelligence that was unmistakably personal. When she spoke, her voice was a sound like controlled thunder that somehow formed recognizable words. "Your kind mistakes cruelty for strength," Luna said, her telepathic voice reaching every mind in the arena simultaneously. "You engineer suffering and call it evolution. True predators understand the difference between necessary violence and pointless brutality. Remember this lesson, little scuttlers. We will be watching." The fact that Luna could speak, that she possessed not just animal intelligence but philosophical wisdom, sent the final shockwaves through the assembled aliens. This wasn't just a weapon that thought, it was a being capable of making moral judgments and acting on them independently. Sarah clipped a safety harness to Luna's neck and climbed aboard, settling into a position between the dragon's shoulder blades that spoke of long practice. "Gentlemen, ladies, and various other classifications," she called out cheerfully. "Thank you for an entertaining afternoon. We'll be sending our regular diplomatic reports through normal channels, but I think our position on council membership is now clear." Luna's takeoff was a masterpiece of controlled power. She rose straight up through the open force field, her wings creating downdrafts that sent sand swirling throughout the arena. Within seconds, she had cleared the atmosphere, leaving nothing behind but the echoes of her wing beats and the profound silence of a galaxy that had just learned it wasn't as civilized as it thought. Ambassador Torres gathered her materials with deliberate calm, her movements unhurried despite the chaos of alien representatives frantically updating their governments about humanity's revealed capabilities. "I believe this concludes today's proceedings," she announced. "The human delegation looks forward to continuing our productive relationships with all council members." As she prepared to leave, Commander Zexthal managed one final question. "Why reveal this now? You could have maintained the secret indefinitely." Torres paused at the exit, considering her response. "Because secrets are tools, Commander. And like any tool, they're only useful when properly applied. Today seemed like the appropriate time to ensure that everyone understood exactly what they were dealing with." She smiled with the kind of diplomatic warmth that carried absolutely no comfort at all. "Besides, this was just one dragon. We thought a small demonstration would be more diplomatic than showing you what 12 of them working together can accomplish." The ambassador left the arena in perfect silence, her footsteps echoing in the vast space where the galaxy's most dangerous predator had just been reduced to a whimpering shadow of its former self. Above the planet, Luna and Sarah were already approaching the human diplomatic vessel, where 11 other dragons waited in formation like living stars against the cosmic darkness. The message was clear to anyone with sensors capable of detecting them. Humanity had always been ready for war. They had simply preferred peace, until now.